Hi, my name is Kaylin Farmer. This is my world music presentation. The topic was music affected by World War II, primarily focusing on Russia and Germany. So the topic was, again, how was music affected by World War II in Germany and Russia, and how were they different? Because Russia and Germany had different roles within World War II, so I wanted to see how those roles had affected how their music and how their culture was, because that really did have a big shift in what their music was and how their government played a big role in all of this. So pre-World War II, Germany was very focused on classical music, folk music, more cabaret and swing music. So going down the timeline, sample of classical music would be our beloved Beethoven. Other people besides Beethoven that were very classical was also Bach, Bossier. So a lot of those classical types of music was very prominent in Germany. This is a link for something that I can't have in my slideshow because of right issues. So this is some German folk music.
Doch alles in der Still und wie es sich schickt. Mein Wunsch und Begehren kann niemand mir wehren. Es bleibet dabei.
Was a good sample of that. And then the last thing, which is, this is actually in Nazi Berlin, so this is right before the war had started in 1939, but it kind of shows like what direction they were going in. So more of like a jazz kind of era that had happened, and that was the direction they were going in. Another thing was that this is where people actually pinpoint where Americanization was happening, and Americanization is a term that I'll definitely explain a little more. So let's continue. So Russia pre-World War II was also very similar to Germany, more of like the folk music, classical, so opera music. Big difference there was the church music was really big in Russia because that was a lot of what their culture was. Their culture was very church-based and community-based. Also, something you see here a lot is that there's a lot of voices in these. So voices are harmonizing, are together, and voice is a very big instrument for them. So a sample of folk music would be this. I'm going to skip around a little bit. So that kind of stuff, as well as the church choir music. The last thing was the best of Rimsky-Korsakov. He was the composer for Swan Lake, The Nutcracker, so big operas that we're very familiar with. So this is something of his work. So a lot of the things that were really similar to Russia and Germany in this aspect was tradition. This is very traditional music, very big music. It was focused on what they were doing before all of this happened, so on their culture, where they were located geographically, etc. Moving on to Germany during World War II, one of the big things with music, it was used for propaganda. One of the big songs was Erika. Erika is about a maiden that kind of gave soldiers that point at this noble cause. It was a girl waiting for them at home, so it gave them kind of a big push. So the lyrics are on the screen here. We can have like a little, test of that. There are a lot of songs like that happened as well. Another thing was that actually during Germany, during World War II, there was a music festival called the Bayreuth Festival. It was an annual music festival that happened to celebrate German culture. Hitler had decided that it was going to be a National Socialist annual event until it stopped being that in 1944. But that was a way to kind of associate his kind of agenda on that, and there was only music that was played that was similar to this type of music, showing people the noble cause of what they were doing to kind of help portray and the kind of nationalism of what they're doing. Other songs that were very popular during Germany during World War II were Unsere Rommel and then SS Meerstrift in Flensland. I can show you samples in a second. But the biggest thing with Unzera Roma was the lyrics. So it was calling out the Brits, like the Britons. It was talking about revenge, talking about Churchill and Roosevelt being so inflamed with rage. So a lot of this was really harsh and kind of distincting who their enemies were. And this was a song that was sung on the streets of Germany, not just on the war zone. So it really affected their culture and their living style. Here's a quick sample of what that sounds like. And some of the other lyrics were pretty gnarly too, so it definitely is a lot of hate. Other thing that was the USS Marastreff in Frensland, that was a song about how just there were enemies crossing through their lands and that they were being a savior, so they were really pushing themselves into that noble cause of having to cleanse and cleanse the earth of these people, and that really was pushed in the song. So it was really very propaganda-like. Russia was very similar with propaganda, but more about nationalism, but there were also some songs about death and loss within the war. One of the big ones was this one, is about the Russian choir, the Red Russian Choir, the Red Army Choir. They were really, really prominent at national events. They sang national songs, and they kind of portrayed their agenda of being the strongest they could possibly be. So the song talked about how no matter what happened, Russia will prevail. Russia is the strongest. Another one that was really popular was The Dark Night. The Dark Night was a song about loss within what had happened. It talks about the sadness.
Темную ночь, ты, любимая, знаю, не спишь.
This talks about the death and the loss that they had served, as well as the next song is a ballad from a journalist who had gotten stuck on the trenches on the war zone, and she talked about her time on the war zone, and they had published it to kind of show a better reason for their cause. So it's kind of a skewed perspective from a quote civilian quote what they're fighting for. So it was really hit hard with them as well. Then Americanization happened. Americanization was a really big coined term about how civilizations become more Western or more like America, or are influenced by America in very different ways. One of the ways is very popular is government, society, capitalism in a way, but in this case we're going to talk about how it affects music. So post-World War II, the Germans are very fascinated with American culture. Even today, there's music playing that is of the new age music, so the Neue Deutsche Welle, so the newest age of the world. But also, it's a lot of American music, actual music we listen to here is also played there too. And that was really unique because it was very close. It was right after World War II had ended. Something to show you an example of like also their newfound ideals of this music is they use this music to express their nationalism and their expressionism, something they didn't really have during World War II or before. So they use a lot of different techniques, like using noise as an element instead of just classical instruments, so that kind of like techno-y in a way. This is an example from Die Prinzen. It's called Deutschland. It kind of shows a nationalism.
Mercedes fährt, Mercedes fährt. Das alles ist Deutschland, das alles sind wir.
The song talks about how awesome the German people are, just because now they're proud of what they've become, and then more like looking more of like what songs they turn into. This is a very popular song. So it kind of shows like how they really familiar with what we do. Oh, wrong button. And then Russia was different. So right after the World War II had ended, it was very different because they were still a Soviet Union. They were still this culture of togetherness. One of the songs that was really popular during that time was called Katsa. And Katsa talked about the loss. So So Katsusha talked about how they had lost a lot of people, but it was still valiant in their mind. And then also one of their kind of skewed ways was that they still listened to music, like classical music. Like the song was in a movie, and the biggest thing was that it was still very jazzy and swingy, so more new age. But the the median of this, or the meaning of this, the song, the Maya Cristialia, was that it was snowing, but it's a beautiful day in Soviet Union. So it was a beautiful day for our government. It was a beautiful day in this. So it was still very controlling of what their people had. And it wasn't until about 1980 is the speculated date where it started to become more Americanized, because the Soviet Union was no longer the Soviet Union. It had fallen and it wasn't that crazy. So one of the big songs we see is more of that expressionism of their true feelings about everything. So one of the more American songs is called Leningrad, not a Paris. And the song's about like a lot of like women being upset. So it's like a really crazy theme where the woman is like a superhero, and she has the power to do what she wants. She doesn't need anyone else to do that. So it was really revolutionary for them, especially subject matter. And those kind of beats and stuff was very away from what Russia was normally like. Another song that has really hits home for at least Russia, I can't pronounce the name, but it sounds like this. So it's a song about how no matter what they do, no matter what they are, even in their own homes, they're still slaves to the government. They're still slaves to being surveilled by their past. They're judged. They're looked at. But it was still new age sounding music. But the culture, the content of the music was still really related to Russia. So it was really unique in that way. And the reflection of all of this is that they both have their own styles of westernized inspired music, but regardless of that, they still maintain their own sense of culture within that music. So within their songs, their ballads, their everything that's going on. Germany took to America a lot more just because of what happened with the Berlin Wall, and how Germany now sees American culture. They're very friendly with America. They're on good terms, whereas Russia took them a long time to become more Americanized because of the Cold War. So it really does push that sense on it. But it's also unique because even now, both of these countries still have Western music playing within them. So very popular songs that we listen to, like pop songs and classic rock songs, stuff like that, are played in those countries. But we don't see a lot of their own music being made anymore because they are so inspired by Western culture. But they still do produce their own songs. It's just that being in the West, we don't get a sense of what their music is. Personally, I lived in Germany for 6 months a couple of years ago, and it was very prominent that American music was very prominent. Everyone knew the latest songs, but just learning about Russia through this experience of this presentation, I had no idea they had their own sense of music, and I had no idea what Russian music even sounded like, at least more modern music. So it was unique to see the content of the music versus what Germany's content is, just because of it's all related back to the war. It's all how the war ended and how their societies branched off after that. So it was really cool to see. Hope you like my video. Sorry I went a little longer than 10 minutes, but I hope this helps. These are all the sources I had. So a lot of the sources were about Europe as a whole, kind of reflecting, and a lot of it was about translations of songs, so I could really talk about what they were about. And thank you.